Today's video is gonna be a bit different than usual, but it concerns a topic that I've been wanting to talk about for a while. Like I've said before, Doom is one of the most important games when it comes to fan games and mods, owing to the fact that the developer id Software distributed the development tools to the fans a few years after release, effectively facilitating their own modding community. And when you consider that legacy, it is perhaps poetic that before Doom, before Wolfenstein, and even before id Software as a whole, some of the people behind id once made their own internal tech demo that included a complete conversion of the first level of Super Mario Bros. 3 running on a PC. And not only that, but also that this tech demo was so revolutionary, in fact, that it inspired them to make id Software in the first place. I don't know that you could necessarily call Dangerous Dave and copyright infringement a fan game. I guess you could say it's a bit of a gray area and a labyrinth of semantics and definitions. On the one hand, Dangerous Dave himself, the star character of the demo, is their own creation, and the people behind it were professionals, to say the least. I mean, John Carmack used to work for Meta until quitting about a week ago, just to give you an idea about the kind of big brain wizards we're talking about here. Now, all of that being said, you could call this limited demo a game in a sense, and presumably, they wouldn't be using Super Mario Bros. 3 assets if they weren't Mario 3 fans, so if you look at it that way, then yeah, you could call it a fan game, but even if it's not, I don't know when else I'm gonna have a good opportunity to talk about this, so screw it. It's time for a little history lesson from Uncle Beano. The year is 1990. Many of the boyos that would become id Software had already established themselves at a company called SoftDisk, and SoftDisk had a subscription service called Gamer's Edge, where every month they'd ship you a floppy of a hot new game, and hopefully it was a good one. In an archived post from the now defunct Planet Romero, available via the Wayback Machine, John Romero recalls going into work one day at 10 a.m. to find a floppy drive on his desk with the writing Dangerous Dave and copyright infringement on it, leaning up against his 33 MHz 386 desktop system, which was the best PC the company had at the time. Now let's pause for a second. Dangerous Dave was a game that Romero had made a month before. It was a 2D platformer that some may notice has a bit of borrowed DNA from the Mario games of the time. I mean, look, he's even got a red hat. Bro thinks he's Mario. Except he's got a gun now. So fast forward back to Dangerous Dave and copyright infringement. Realizing the boyos had been up to something, Romero puts the disc in his computer, and there is Dangerous Dave in the first level of Super Mario Bros. 3. Pretty funny joke. That is until he walked to the right to see the screen scrolling horizontally in a very smooth fashion, and he was blown away. To quote the archived article directly, "The screen scrolled smoothly." Time stopped. I was speechless. John Carmack and Tom Hall had done the impossible. They got a smooth, side-scrolling platformer to actually run on a PC. Now, some of you might be a little confused and wondering why this is important and why it matters at all beyond a little footnote in the history books of video games, and you're not alone. Romero recalls that even some of his own co-workers didn't instinctively grasp the significance of this achievement. So to understand this, you gotta keep in mind that the kind of personal computers that were commonplace at that time, even including Romero's super powerful 386, weren't really built to run Mario tier 2D platformers. Yes, there were attempts at it, but not nearly in the same capacity as the NES or the Genesis. Now, you might think that if a $200 NES could do smooth side-scrolling, surely a $2,500 computer of the era could do it with 2 cores tied behind its back. But it just wasn't that simple. For one thing, the 386 only has 1 core. Today, getting a 2D platformer to run on a PC is a completely trivial endeavor. That's not to say making a good 2D platformer is easy or anything, but getting a side-scrolling 2D level to work on a PC, from a purely technical standpoint, is not a particularly hard thing to do nowadays. PCs have progressed to the point now where even 3D graphics are trivial. If you bought even a mid-range laptop in 2013, it could probably run GTA 5, so a 2D platformer is gonna be no problem. Such was not the case in 1990. It's not like today where the architecture of a game console and a PC are starting to have more similarities than differences. Consoles were designed with chipsets whose sole purpose was to put pretty things on the screen and to make it smooth. And PCs were designed to write Word docs and file taxes, or if you were lucky, draft engineering documents. And again, they did have some graphics capabilities, but generally not to the extent of the consoles of the time. The original Dangerous Dave moves in one massive chunk once you hit the edge of the screen, which didn't make for the smoothest, most immersive gameplay experience by Romero's own admission. This smooth, side-scrolling technology, trivial as it might sound today, was revolutionary, and to quote John Romero in the Netflix show High Score, it was validating the PC as an actual game-playing machine, and I was like, this technology is huge. We need to start a company and make our own game. And to quote the article again, the second the screen scrolled, id was born. So id Software, and by extension Wolfenstein and Doom, might not have existed if it wasn't for a tech demo ripping the assets from Super Mario Bros. 3. So if we are to consider Dangerous Dave and copyright infringement a fan game, then a fan game gave birth to Doom, which in turn legitimized fan games to the masses. Isn't video game history just fucking bonkers? Well, there's my SparkNotes history lesson out of the way, but how about we talk about the actual game itself? Now, the game itself doesn't do very much, the reasons for which should be clear if you've been paying attention, and if you haven't been paying attention, you're getting an F and your GPA is screwed, because Professor Bino has tenure and you can't do anything about it. As a platformer, it controls a lot better than I expected it to. There is some weirdness with the collision, but other than that, it is surprisingly responsive and fluid. Is it as responsive as Super Mario Bros. 3? Yeah, I don't know about that, but it's mostly such a cool thing because of the technology on display. For the record, I am playing this on a DOSBox emulator through RetroArch, so if you're wanting to give this a spin for yourself, I recommend doing that. The game has 2 levels, but the only way to load the second level, as far as I can tell, is to rename the second level's file name in the game folder to the name of the first level, while swapping the first level's name to a placeholder name. I think the second level is intended to show off the vertical scrolling, considering its use of verticality in contrast to the very horizontally oriented first level. As for how authentic it looks, it is unmistakably Super Mario Bros. 3, at least the first level. I don't remember the second level, but as I said, it was probably intended to demonstrate the power of verticality. There are no enemies and no power-ups, but there are coins everywhere. And the game's got sound effects too, albeit not as crisp as the old NES. Nevertheless, it is a fascinating piece of history and one that should definitely be remembered. According to that same archived article, they actually created a much more polished and Mario-themed demo of Super Mario Bros. 3 running on a PC and even sent it to Nintendo to see if they could get some kind of deal. Supposedly, even Miyamoto himself actually got to see it, and although they were impressed, nothing really came of it since Nintendo was now a console manufacturer and their policy was to keep their games on their own machines. Some things never change. But the legacy of unofficial PC ports of Nintendo games continues to this day. Of course, it's no longer a technical dance, but more so just to show off and give it ray tracing, but I've always said that I like to imagine people who make ROM hacks, fan games, conversions, or what have you, are the big boy developers of tomorrow. And the decision to try and get smooth side-scrolling to work on a PC had a massive domino effect on the industry. Without it, there's no id. Without id, there's no Wolfenstein. Without Wolfenstein, there's no Doom. Without Doom, there's no Quake, or GoldenEye, or Halo. So many things just wouldn't be. A tech demo using Super Mario Bros. 3 assets changed the world. That, my friends, is wild. And if nothing else, please, let it inspire you, because god damn it, it inspired me. Ho ho ho! Thank you for watching a very special episode of this year's Christmas Marathon. There are a lot of lessons to be learned from today's episode. Sometimes curiosity can be hugely rewarded, and something that might not seem like a big deal to others could be holding a huge amount of potential. Now, you remember that and carry it with you for as long as you live. Now, tomorrow is going to be the final episode of the marathon, and I'd just like to tell you all what a grand, merry time it has been. And I promise none of you will be able to guess the topic of tomorrow's episode, but I invite you to try it anyway. But rest assured, it will be a surprise, ho ho.